Greetings, bloggers, vloggers, followers, and potters. Dustin here from Dustin's Dynasty with yet another edition of this week's vlog. This is my 339th vlog. I don't know why I'm saying that, but if you've been following me a while, my name is Dustin. I'm autistic. I'm in my late 30s. I've been living independently for 6 years for the most part, and I've had a job for what I've celebrated this week, 15 years. So I know how to live independently. I'm pretty well versed in autism, being diagnosed at the age of 13 or 14, and just navigating life. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Navigating life's challenges. And it's ironic because we're coming up on we've done 300 and some of these vlogs, and it's almost been 5 years. And if you remember what 5 years ago was, next week, it has been when the pandemic came and everything shut down. And I guess you would say that would be where I got my inkling for writing at first. And then with everything being so like this on the having a webcam and things of that nature. And once I got settled in my new environment after having a very rambunctious turn of events, and I had to live with my parents temporarily, I was able to start the vlogs in July of 2020. And so in this July, probably over the 4th of July, we'll probably have a big anniversary thing. But that's been a long time. And navigating life's challenges. Geez, I could speak probably the world on navigating life's challenges. Everybody navigates challenges in their life. But for me, a person who is autistic and has some mental health diagnoses that are comorbidities to carry along with that makes it challenging. And there can be times when those challenges fall into my lap that I just want to give up, or I want to say things that aren't really meant to be said, because as autistic people and people of my caliber of autism, we don't sometimes have the filter that we need to have when saying things. We say what's on our mind and we don't think about it. And sometimes lately that has been what it is, because life is challenging. Life has things happen. And I used to be one years ago who was like that. And I would, for me, adapting to change or navigating life's challenges, however you look at it. But the title of the vlog is Navigating Life's Challenges. However you look at it, you look at it in a way of it's challenging, because before I was diagnosed at the age of 13, growing up, everything was a challenge. I was a big factor on the time, the clock. I thought everything had to go according to the clock. And if it didn't, if things didn't happen the way that I expected them to, as many autistic people have a rigidity and they like things in a routinistic way, um, it was all hell broke loose essentially. And things weren't pleasant and meltdowns happened. And eventually those waned off, and it's become easier, and thank goodness it has, even though I've navigated several challenges within the past year. And it's but I'm doing better. And I think sometimes we don't realize, even though I am doing better, autism still is not easy. And to anyone who says there is no easy autism, their autism is easy, it is not. There is no autism that is easy out there. It's just everybody experiences challenges in a different way. Everybody experiences being autistic in a different way. There are multiple ways or levels or support needs that people may need. And no two people are the same. So what I may experience may be different from what the individual down the street or across town experiences. But life is challenging. And the last 5 years have really proven that, from having having a pandemic, living through a pandemic that there wasn't one in 100 years prior, and living through that and not knowing what was going to happen day to day. I mean, when we look back at that, and we think, you know We don't know what's going on. We're sent home. We were told 2 weeks, no services, and then it ended up, day services were virtual for me for a while. And, I worked from home for thankfully, and I was able to be kept on the payroll for, a couple months because I worked, 5 hours a week, and that was half of what I work now. But, at least having that, little bit of income, it really helped. And, that was really a blessing in a way to keep me, number one, busy, and number two, some little bit of spending money, although you couldn't do nothing with it because the road was shut down. But it was a very challenging time for everybody. And it was especially challenging for people who were autistic and who needed that routine and things where everything was different for not only for autistic people, but for neurotypical people all around the world. And life as we knew it was very challenging. And on top of all of that, in 2020, I had my own other issues. My first apartment that, later I couldn't even live in it, and I was paying rent for it for some God for a reason, and I couldn't live in it, and I was living in a small bedroom in my parents' house while navigating the world. I think that's what made the pandemic a lighter issue for me because I had so many other issues at the time, but I navigated through them and I got through them. And I don't know how I did it. I can't even answer how I did it. I think part of me was unwell, and there were some meltdowns, and there were some pretty bad meltdowns that resulted in some regression back then. But I overcame them, and through the grace of God, I believe, months later, once everything a little bit opened up, little by little, I was able to get my apartment that I have now, and that's in November of 2020. And life was still challenging. We were wearing masks, we were social distancing, we were going up and down the aisles. Things were different. And things are still different, but I was reverent and I kept going. And no matter how hard it was, I kept going, and it just keeps, it kept on going as even as the pandemic went away, there was still more challenges thrown in my path. And I don't like change. Who does when you're autistic? A lot of people who are autistic do not like change, and I am no exception. But to a degree, I've managed it better. And even though there were things that, I hurt with, and, it caused me anxiety. And, anxiety is a big piece of my diagnosis too. And, I lived with things and I didn't want to do things. I had grief over those things. And I just learned that today and I'm training at work. But, I think we experience grief. When we think of grief, we think of somebody passing or somebody, leaving the earth. But really, we have grief over many things. And some things that were around for decades or more, they happened and they're gone. And sometimes we grieve over those things, and sometimes it's passive. And then eventually it rolls down and it gets into a point of anger and resentment. And I experienced that for a lot last year. And eventually I came to my senses that things are better now, even though they're different. And that's hard to see sometimes. But, things are challenging, when you look at things. And even this past year has been nothing but changes, challenges. There's something every day. I could tell you a million things that happened this week. One thing, is a power line came down on my parents' road and to my parents' house, and it changed the way we got around and got to our meeting and got to dinner, and the things had to happen to make that happen, and being grateful for others and knowing others in that process for doing what they needed to do to help us, and knowing that they were there to help us, and being responsible and calling the emergency services so that they would come out and work on the power pole and make things safe. All of those things change. If anything, that is resilient about me in the past 5 years, ever since doing these vlogs and writing the blog, is that I have endured so much change. And yes, change is hard. Autism is never easy. There are moments when I get angry. There are moments when I get upset. And those close to me can tell you those moments when I get angry or when I get upset and I want to take it out on people verbally, or I want to, and sometimes people just can't handle that. And part of that, when we're faced with life's challenges, is that we have to be mature sometimes. And for me, being mature in a world where I've always had things the way I wanted it, or the things were easy for me, or that were known, or could be, there for me, wasn't always easy, but more and more I'm learning to adapt and getting into the groove of things, even as hard as it can be, as challenging as it can be. There can be moments when just, I just want to cry and break down, but that's okay because that's what makes us human, right? um but in so many other ways things are going so well, and I'm conducting myself well, and I'm holding myself together, and I know I have to hold myself together when facing life's challenges, even as they happen, because we talked a lot on the vlog here, about my relapse a couple years ago, and how I had a little mini one last year, and how I now know how important medication is for me. Now, granted, it's not for everyone, but for me, it is a necessity. It is a life support. It is a tool in my toolbox, because without that, I can't manage what comes down the pike. I can't manage the irritability. I can't manage what happens from day to day and time to time. There's things, that could happen and would happen. And as much as, there are things that don't cure autism, but they help manage the challenges. And as much as I was in denial about that for 5 or 6 years, almost 6 years, I've learned to accept that it's a necessity now, with everything going on in my life, and that is changing and moving and always going, that medication is a part of life, and it keeps my life going, even when there are other moving pieces that are more challenging. And it's accepting that and knowing that it's important, and taking care of my mental health is important. But also what's important is breaking through the anxiety and the fear, because I know I have to. There's a part of me that is maturing and growing up, even as I turn nearly 40, and saying, I have to do this because my family needs me, or my work needs me, or I'll be better mentally if I do this, or if I just break through that barrier and see that there's the good that comes out of it, and overall being kind and not causing a ruckus, and taking care of myself in the way that I need to. All of those things mixed together help in the fact of I'm doing well, because I'm doing what I need to do to be well, even though it is challenging and it is hard, and there are moments when it can be hard, but I know what needs to happen for me to be well, and I can't let that down, and I know that people count on me, and that's just important. And I mean, this is not just a glorifying session for me. This is just what really life is. And, autism isn't easy. And even for me, who seems to have it all together, who navigates life so eloquently, who can communicate so well, who was once an introvert and is now more of an extrovert, who takes that step and braves it all. It wasn't easy for me in the beginning. It's still not easy at times. There's times I want to, anxiety kicks it up in the rear and wants me to run away from all my problems, but I can't, because I have to be strong. I have to be strong for family, and I have to be strong for those I love. And it's also the fact that I have to be strong for those I love, and those who need me right now and need me in life situations that are not only hard for me, but they're just as hard for those I love and love me and the family. So it's important that I be my best so that I can do the things I need to do to be well and take care of myself so that, things happen the way they need to happen and they're not as difficult. I think that's something I realized overall in the past 5 to 6 years when I wasn't taking care of myself was everything was so difficult and so irritable and so whiny and so complaining and just complacent and just not wanting to do anything and not having no energy. Just all of those things were so difficult. And eventually I realized, hey, if I take care of myself and I do the simple things, some things it's I know I don't like to harp on the medicine so much, but it was something that I was missing out on, and it really it helped me so much. And I realized that, I'm doing what's necessary to care for my mental health and my physical health, and things will get better. Things, if, there, I can tell you many times, life was challenging for me after I was first diagnosed as being autistic or with Asperger's as it was in the late 90s. I couldn't even go to school some days, and school was challenging. I was bullied constantly. I was just bullied and I acted out and school didn't know what to do with me. And eventually, they didn't, I got suspended a couple times and I got sent away a couple times. And I was eventually put in residential treatment after multiple psychiatric hospitalizations. Sometimes it was just surviving the day. And, it is challenging. I read on Facebook on my profile many autistic families who struggle, but being in those days when you know you have, thankfully, I had parents who fought for me, and there are many mama bears out there, and I give kudos to all of you. But you know, and I guess it's why I resonate because my mama bear was had her instincts when we needed them the most, and she did one of the hardest things, but one of the best things was put me in residential treatment so we could get the med cocktail worked on, and eventually it turned out, and it wasn't perfect when I got out, nothing was, but eventually things get better. And I think sometimes after just thinking, can I just survive the day after a severe blowout meltdown or just, the worst thing that could happen? And, eventually, it got better and the meltdowns went away. And they still happen. They're just a little, they're not verbal, but eventually they dissipated from the physical aggression and the hours of passive restraint and the trauma from all that and just so much. And I think sometimes we don't realize it until decades later, but it it made me stronger in essence because if I could have gone through all of that over all those years and eventually came out the better person that I am, that is renowned for his work and renowned for what he does. And again, that's not a glorification technique. That's what it really is. And for being able to do all the things that I can do and still, manage life's challenges as they happen, then that is definitely a kudos on the back because definitely, it's showing me that I'm strong and I can take whatever challenges are thrown my way. And there will be some this year. They're still coming down the pike and they're going to be hard and they're going to be tough. And I'm going to have to make tough decisions and I'm going to have to sacrifice. But you know what? I know I can do it. And many autistic people can do many things if you always presume competence and believe that they can. And I think this is just something, what's coming up down the road. And I think I'll go on with it later on. But, I think eventually, as struggles come, I can conquer them if I really put my mind to it. And I know I can, and I will. And challenges are there in life. And to imagine that little kid who threw a hissy fit or threw a meltdown, as we know it now, about the bus being a few minutes late or things not going the way that I wanted them to go, and being that one who was reacting in the store because he didn't get what he wanted. You know, it does get better. It's not perfect, but it does get better in the end. So I just want to assure everybody who is from the spectrum community that it does get better in the end. So I want to thank you for listening today. I really appreciated sharing those moments with you. Be sure to like me and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Be sure to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, X, and Pinterest. Those handles are Dustin's Dynasty at Dustin's Dynasty. I'm on the web. That address is www.dustinsdynastyusa.com. And lastly, I'm on Linktree, where you can find all my handles to all my web content, as well as sign up for my newsletter and my podcasting platforms, where this video will be shared. And that handle is Dustin's Dynasty under Linktree. Again, I want to thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.